Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you tune into the channel and check out the content. I was just going to do a mic check, and then I realized that it was on. But in this video, man, I want to speak on not LeBron, but Stephen A. Smith, right? And Stephen A. Smith reminds me of the guy from the movie Life, the movie Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence and the guy Hop and Bob, right? And because once you make a decision to go away from, I guess, like move, like go away from your people and uh betray your people, betray your people. That's a decision that you make knowing and you're fully aware of what you're doing, right? And so that's how I see Stephen A. Smith. Like when he made the decision a long time ago to betray people, betray his own people, no matter what the cost, right? And so that's why I call Stephen A. Smith Hopping Bob. So Stephen A. Smith recently went at Jaylen Brown, and this just exposes Stephen A. Smith as to like his character and what he's up to. Everybody know how Stephen A. Smith is. He's not fooling nobody. And I think that people who do this, right? People who, first of all, let me just say that I think that you can have success in business without betraying other people. Without, I think it's just a lazy way of going about things, and it makes you. I think you can't really be happy as a person when you do this because you don't have the respect of your peers. You you cut off. You really alienate yourself, right? Because Stephen A. Smith, if he ever in his life needed a fan base or people or public support, he wouldn't be able to get it because of his public image, right? And so a lot of people in the entertainment business, some people in the entertainment business and sports, they make this mistake from alienating themselves from the public just for money. And so if ESPN, he's at the mercy of ESPN, and Stephen A. Smith knows this, right? And so he's very careful not to step on, any toes over there at ESPN because he know what will happen to him if he step outside the lines. That's why he said, he made that quote, that famous quote where he said that, the first thing he do when he get up in the morning is think about how he can make his bosses some money and then how he could get some of that, right? He didn't care how it came off or anything like he knew how it would come off, but he didn't care because he made up his mind that that's the kind of life that he wanted to lead. He wanted to live, right? So, like I said, now he went up against Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown just exposed and shed more light on what type of character that Stephen A. Smith had. Stephen A. Smith made his mind up that that's the way he's going to go out. But I wouldn't, in my opinion, I just wouldn't advise people to take this route. You have to have self-respect about yourself. You got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. And I see Stephen A. Smith as somebody who is not happy. When you do these kind of things to people, especially unnecessarily, like if in a competition, like if you're a competitive person and you're playing a sport and you do things to win the game, that's one thing. Like, but in business, when you're a competitive person and you do things, especially you step on people when you don't have to, it makes you a hardened person. And if you're a hardened person like that, that's not a healthy thing to be. I remember I made videos back of like a few years ago about the lady, what's her name? Wendy Williams, right? She made a business out of just like exposing people and talking about people and just, and she called, I think like the tea or something like that, right? That kind of negative vibe and that kind of negative energy, you directing it at other people, but it also comes back on you and it affects your health. And I honestly believe that a big part of why, like Wendy Williams is not healthy to this day is because of the negative energy that she put out. And so now that you have social media, right, it's going to become more apparent because I see more people on social media putting negative information out there and spilling, you know, what they call the tea on different people, and that's a negative vibe, right? It's a negative vibe, and that stuff comes back, and it really do affect your health. And so more people are going to be noticing that, you know, so it won't just be one example of that. It's going to be more examples of that, because you can't put negative vibes out there and then it don't come back to you, right? And so that's what I believe with Stephen A. Smith. So look, man, I want to play this video that Jaylen Brown, you know, I think he was giving a lecture. I'm not sure where he was giving a lecture at, but Jaylen Brown is just intelligent and articulate, right? And when you listen to him, he kind of explains like about people like Stephen A. Smith, because everybody you might encounter them at work. You know, you might be working with somebody who's just like Stephen A. Smith, but you have to know how to handle these people and realize that these people are not happy. But let's listen to Jaylen Brown, and you know, you get a sense of how articulate and how intelligent Jaylen Brown is.
Discipline and Punish talked about panopticism. She based it off of a prison design, right? It was a prison design with a watchtower in the middle of the prison. And this theory was that, like, by putting the watchtower in the middle, the prisoners would police themselves because they're under surveillance. So physical authority has shifted to psychological authority, right? And over time, their behaviors change. And this causes a term she calls dynamic normalization. So in the digital age, the watchtower has transferred. So through technology, through bots, through fake viral clips, fake accounts, you can police platforms and algorithmically influence society with the technology that you can control. The technology that you can control can dictate the market. We see it across various industries all the time. A lot of people have seen some of my quarrels with the media industry. That's kind of the reason why I started streaming. You know, some of you have seen my stream, and you know, I'm going off on Stephen A. Smith. But exactly. But Stephen A. works for ESPN. ESPN is controlled by Disney. Stephen A. doesn't choose the topics. Somebody chooses them for him. You know, his willingness has made him extremely valuable to these companies. But you know, a lot of these companies and corporations, they meet 4 times a year and talk about amongst various industries how they can socially engineer and influence our minds, right, through the technology that they can control without us really even paying attention and even noticing it. Just like the Michel Foucault theory, where I was talking about the watchtower that is policing the prisoners. Bots, comments, positive comments or negative comments could affirm whatever agendas that they want to push. They can create the bots, they can control kind of the approvals or disapprovals of what is in society. Another example is kind of like group thinking.
All right, so basically you get the point, right? So he said that Stephen A. Smith don't pick the topic. He basically is a mouthpiece for you know, for ESPN, right? And so also he spoke about Stephen A. Smith being willing, like he's a willing participant. And that's what these big corporations like ESPN and Disney, that's what they need, somebody like Stephen A. Smith, like Hop and Bob, who's willing to you know, to do whatever it is to go along and not really you know, to be a willing participant in, you know, and really just holding people back or holding people down and trying to control people through the media. Stephen A. Smith been doing this for years, as far as like with ESPN. And you know, to me, like I said, I just think that it's going to have a negative effect. Whether he will be ever put in a position where if he piss off ESPN, I don't know if something like that is going to happen, right? But I do know, like, being on the front lines of this type of, because he's catching a whole bunch of negative vibes, and no matter what Stephen A. Smith try to say publicly, and you know, he try to justify it and think that he know that people don't like him. You know, and people have even told him to his face that he's a sellout. People have told him to his face that that they don't like him. and that the community don't like him. Like black people as a whole, like his community just don't really mess with Stephen A. Smith, and he knows that. But he tried to say otherwise. But stuff like that, even though he tried to brush it off, stuff like that really stick with Stephen A. Smith. And I know he had a contract for like $100 million, but he'll really realize that, you could have made half that money and been happy. Like what are you going to buy with $100 million that you couldn't have bought with like, 50 million or 25 million? It just makes you more of a consumer, really, because like money don't equate to power, especially you somebody like Stephen A. Smith who's just saying what he's a puppet anyway. So he's just a consumer. He's not a businessman, he's a consumer. And he's gonna realize, man, that he made a big mistake. And so, but I think the way you kind of combat people like this, like I said, it's a whole lot of Stephen A. Smiths out there. But you don't allow these type of people to steal your like your energy. You don't let them you don't let them affect your energy. You see through what they're doing. You don't let them stop you from doing or going where you need to go. And you really just, I basically feel sorry for people like Stephen A. Smith, because it's something that you really don't have to do, and so that's my take on it. Like I said, Jaylen Brown just brought more light to what everybody always knew about Stephen A. Smith. I always call Stephen A. Smith Hoppin' Bob or Stephen from the movie Django. Those kind of guys, man, they just not happy. And so make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, man, I'm gonna check you all out in the next video. Peace.